Are we live yet? Okay, wonderful. Oh, hold on one sec. Okay, Councilman Villarreal will be joining us on Zoom. So keep an eye out. She'll be popping on. Well, let's give her a minute. She's actually going to jump on right now. Bill?
We are not live.
Thank you. And have we had, has anyone popped onto the Zoom yet? Councilwoman and Ms. Martin, is she on Zoom as well? Okay, wonderful. Can we get the screen on so I can see if she raises her hand or
Can you hear me on?
I can hear you, I just can't see you.
Excellent. Thanks.
There we go. Okay. Well, in that case, at 5:02 PM, 5:03 PM, I'm going to call the October 18th Quality of Life Committee meeting to order. Can I please get a roll call?
Counselor Chavez.
Here.
Counselor Lee Garcia,
Here.
Counselor Michael Garcia,
Present.
Counselor Villarreal,
Present.
Chair Cassett.
I am here.
You have a quorum, Madam Chair.
Thank you so much. Moving on to approval of the agenda. Do we have any changes to the agenda? And if not, can I get a motion?
Move to approve. Second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. On to approval of the consent agenda. Loretta, can you remind me the letters of what was pulled today?
Yes, item C was pulled by Counselor Michael Garcia. Item F was pulled by Counselor Michael Garcia and Counselor Villarreal.
Thank you so much. Anything else to be pulled without staff present?
It's one of the council.
Sounds like somebody needs to mute. No, we're okay. Okay, can I please get a motion to approve as amended? So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. May I please have a roll call?
Madam Chair, I didn't catch who made the motion in the second. I'm sorry.
Counselor Chavez and I believe Counselor Lee Garcia for the second. Oh, Counselor
Thank
Michael
you.
Garcia.
Michael,
Counselor
thank
Garcia.
you. Counselor Chavez,
Yes.
Counselor Lee Garcia,
Yes.
Counselor Michael Garcia,
Yes.
Counselor Villarreal,
Yes.
Chair Cassett.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you so much. All right, moving on to our presentations, we have an impact report on NLC Inclusive Entrepreneurship Program to increase childcare service providers from Elizabeth Camacho, Economic Development and Communication Administrator. Liz, it's good to see you. Take it away. I'm not sure the mic's on.
Oh, sorry. And I'm usually so loud. I have to remember to keep it down now with the mic. I just wanted to give you guys an update. I presented to y'all when we received the $15,000 grant from the NLC for a cities of inclusive entrepreneurship, and our city had specifically, they'd given us different choices. We chose childcare as where we would put our focus. And this presentation is really just to update you guys a bit on what happened with the $15,000. And actually, Kira's team, they also supplemented it and put in another $15,000 because we found a really great program with incentives with Growing Up New Mexico. So it was a very collaborative program. Also, Kira's team with childcare already had a lot of the research that we needed in all of the reports. It was quite thorough. So if you want to go to the next slide. So yeah, this is basically that we got the $15,000. We also worked closely with the Chamber of Commerce and Growing Up New Mexico. You want to go to the next one? And basically, it's the biggest barriers that we saw was that we have a lot of women who are in the childcare industry. And there is a lot of low wage, there's few health benefits. Some of the other barriers that we see in terms of entrepreneurship of people going into the industry, a lack of access to resources in Spanish. It is very much a family friends network of people who do this. And then some of the other things are the zoning and licensing applications. And it's not necessarily, well, it being in Spanish, if you want to do it, especially for your home, but also just what do you need to do to make your home somewhere that you could have children and watch over them. So I think that's part of what that is just not knowing how you could make your home into something that could be a childcare business. And then difficulty in running a business. Most people, when they start a business, they love what they're going into business, but they don't necessarily like the financial side of things. And here we have something very similar where it's just like, oh, GRTs, taxes, how much do I have to say? How often do I have to report? How much do I pay employers? So all of those things are really big barriers. One of the biggest barriers, I think, from the studies that Kira's team did was also, it's not a profitable business. One day, one child doesn't show up and they cancel, then they're barely making it. Like they have to have all the children who are scheduled to be with them there in order for that to be something that's profitable for them. And basically, the program that we did with Growing Up New Mexico incentivized many things. So they incentivized things like CPR training, certifications, because if you get certification, maybe you don't start your own business, but you could actually go work for somebody else as well. And there's also a need for certification. And if you get things like child-proofing your home, which they would help with, they would also then incentivize it. It would be like $100, $25 to join the program. And they'd also even pay for the class itself. So this is what our money contribution went to, as well as marketing it so that we could have people in Santa Fe. It's called Escalones, and it is a New Mexican program. And we just simply made it stronger here in Santa Fe by adding more funds to it. And here's where we can see some of the fundings that they had from the program, which again is just as I mentioned. We want to the next one. And some of the impacts that we had, well, we have 15 people who, caregivers who came in, and then, hold on, let me see my stats, because I'm like, where are my glasses? Sorry. Yes. So we had basically 15 new people who came into the program. We also had 1,725 that were given out to people. We had an event with Southside Feria, and during Southside Feria, one of the biggest things that we really had was that's where we started getting a lot of people to participate in the program and go into the program. We haven't had anybody go into the accelerator program yet. But we also had approximately, we also had approximately 25 people who participated via Facebook when we had some of the workshop sessions, and we had about 12 people who, what's this? Oh, sorry. Oh, thank you. Who did the CPR certifications. They did the Circle of Security training. And so this also really contributes to having safer childcare as well. And that's our conclusion. We're hoping to keep working with the program. That's something we're reviewing. And I think Kira's department, Julie Sanchez, will be keeping to work with it. I think that it's an excellent program. I think we should think of other ways that we can incentivize people towards entrepreneurship. Because a lot of the barriers are really about funding. And on the last page, I put some of the specific certificates and training that went to. Thank you. Any questions, please?
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Liz. Before we jump to questions, a couple things. Councilwoman Villarreal needs to be promoted to a panelist, please. Also, she is reporting that she's having a hard time hearing us. So I'm curious if there is any setting on the Zoom that might be impacting that. She has her volume up 100%.
Madam Chair,
Yes,
I can hear you all, having a hard time hearing Ms. Camacho.
okay.
Just, she may be having a hard time just with Ms. Camacho.
She said all of us, so it might be, focused to really speak into the mic.
Except Elizabeth, she's very clear.
Okay, so the other person on Zoom is very clear. Interesting. I'm not sure what to do since this doesn't seem to be a universal problem. Do you want to try to log off and log back in and see if it's kind of the, hold the restart button for 15 seconds phenomenon?
Are you talking to me?
Yes, I am. Sorry.
Okay, sorry. I think it's fine if you all just try to speak a little bit like closer to your mics. Thank you.
Okay. Great. Thank you. Okay, sorry about that little brief intermission. Back to Liz's presentation. Thank you so much for coming here and for giving us that update. Are there any questions or comments from the committee? Counselor Lee Garcia.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just thank you for the presentation again. Always nice to see things twice. Sometimes you catch things that you missed. In this case, and I don't know if we talked about this before, but I think that one of the, we talked about safety and people who decide to utilize or go on this, what type of background checks are done, things of that nature, what type of agencies?
You can actually get, wow, that feels really loud, but you can get certified to have the background check. You can have the background check, sorry, and then you make money if you allow them to do the background check, because background check is part of the certification process as well. So that's one of the incentives. I forgot how much money it is for adhering to a background check. But the people who participate in the program, we don't give them background checks necessarily. They come in, and as soon as you get a welcome kit, you get $25 just for signing up to participate and to have some interest in it. And then you start earning depending on what you want, which way you want to go. And if you want to go into the childcare industry as an employee, and they'll do the background check for you, and they'll give you money for having done the background check. And it also will then cover for wherever the business is, the childcare business, it covers the background check for them, so they don't have to do it. So in that sense, it's kind of helping two people, because when you have one of the instructors or childcare providers who are not there at the place of work, and in terms of like, oh, you're doing training, can we pay you to do training? Again, it's such a tight business that they can't really afford to do that. So if through this program, you have people who are childcare providers, they can send them to them, and the background check will be done because they are part of the program.
Thank you. So like people that are interested or are going through these trainings and stuff, not until they're actually working in the field directly with children or organizations are they background checked. I guess that's where I was headed.
We definitely, if they're going into the field and if they're going to open up a business in that area, yeah, but there's so many steps. It's a very slow process to start that business. Again, just because it's the funding, the infrastructure of making your home safe for childcare. So there are a lot of steps that they have to take.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Any other questions or comments from members of the committee? Doesn't look like it. I have a hand raised. What hand is raised? Oh, just, okay. Our interpreter, whoa, what's going on, guys? I can't read that. Is it
Just raising
Keely?
my hand. It's Kelly. I'm just raising my
Okay.
hand because we have not been assigned as interpreters. Both Sandra and myself are supposed to be assigned as interpreters so that we can be interpreting on Zoom. Right now, there's only 2 attendees, so I don't think they've needed us, but for just in case more people show up.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
If we could get that taken care of. Thank you. A lot of Zoom learning. today.
Madam Chair, I'm aware that the IT group is working on that problem right now.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Appreciate that. Well, Liz, thank you so much for being here. Sorry for all of our Zoom interruptions, but I
Oh,
appreciate you.
sorry for mine not being able to see the screen. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. All right, moving on. First item pulled from consent. Item C, this is request for approval of a budget amendment resolution, BAR, to increase the funds for fiscal year 2024 for audit preparation and account consulting in the total amount of $795,883, which is the unexpended amount originally budgeted for FY 2023. We have Director Oster here to present. And Counselor Michael Garcia, floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Director Oster. Hope all is well with you. Just a quick question, and I don't anticipate you're going to have this info readily available, and if we can get it maybe emailed to us after the fact or at the next stop, wherever it may be. Just more so wondering in regards to the overall amount of resources and amount of people power we've used through our auditing processes going back to when the first audit was laid in this consecutive process, which was fiscal year 20. So since fiscal year 20, our audits have been consistently late since then. And so if I can, there's two folds to this request. The amount of consultants, and if we can get the names of all the consultants that have been involved in our auditing process since fiscal year 20, as well as the dollar amount that each consultant required payment from us. And then that would ultimately allow us to get and from 20 to now, a grand total amount of funding we've paid to work on our audit since fiscal year 20. And so again, I don't anticipate you to have these numbers readily available, but I wanted to make sure that I asked you for these, and just that way it's helpful as we're planning for the future in regards to how to prepare once we get out of the audit predicament we're currently in. My focus and intention is always about sustainability and how can we utilize resources to go towards staff support versus consultant support, and just very much interested in that process just for us and what that looks like in the future. So again, don't anticipate the answers tonight, but if I can get some clarification on that, that would be fantastic.
Certainly, Madam Chair and Councilor Garcia, I'll work on putting that together. Just to clarify, you said the names of all of the consultants. Are you referring to the individual staff members from each firm, or are you talking?
No, just
names
the
of the-
organization names is perfectly fine. We don't need to go to that much of a micro level. Just organizational names that, whether they were internal auditors, external auditors, the amount of the contracts that they were for, because I know some of the contracts were amended to go higher amounts just because for some reason or another. But yeah, from fiscal year 20, and the reason why I said fiscal year 20 is because that is when we kind of got in this unfortunate vicious cycle of delayed audits kind of being consecutive. Because 20 was late, 21 was late, 22 is late. And so just trying to figure out what it's cost us as a city in regards to this unfortunate situation. Thank you, Director Oster.
Madam Chair and Councilor Garcia, you mentioned internal auditors. They wouldn't have worked on the audits, the external compliance audits. So you wanted the internal audit information as well?
Yes, so like Carr Riggs and Ingram that are doing our audits externally, but then we've got CLA that are working on them internally because we don't have the capacity for staff to do so.
I see. Okay. I understand now. So the internal auditor was REDW in the past, and that's a different function. We also had REDW doing consulting to help prepare for the audits. So I think I understand.
Yeah, anybody that kind of touched the auditing process that was non-staff.
Okay, and Madam Chair and Councilor Garcia, I just wanted to take that opportunity to let you know that as of this pay period, we're down to 14 vacancies in the finance department, which is the lowest since I've been here. We have 2 more new hires in the pipeline, which would take us down to 12, which is just above 20%. And so we're going to continue to chip away at that, but the vacancy rate is trending in the right direction. We had a peak in July of 19 vacancies, so I'm pleased that we've, been able to fill 5 positions in the last 3 months. And we will continue. We still have many recruitments underway. So I agree that we are focused on building our internal capacity so that we're less reliant on contractors going forward.
Awesome. And thank you for sharing that great news. Congratulations, and excited that we're down to a dozen and hopefully more, and it gets into the single digits, and just wish you all the best with that continued success for recruitment. Good job. Thank you for that update. Thank you, Madam Chair. No other questions.
Thank you, Counselor. Before we jump on, I actually think that this was brought up a really good learning opportunity of internal audit versus external audit and the internal audit function. Do you mind explaining that? Because I know I understand what Counselor Garcia is asking for, but I also, you mentioned that REDW had kind of 2 jobs, one having to do with our internal audit function, which is something that is not our audit that we frequently talk about. Do you mind jumping into that a little bit more? I think it's a good learning opportunity.
Certainly, Madam Chair, absolutely. So we have our external financial and compliance audit, which is required by state law, by the Audit Act, and that's done under the supervision of the Office of the State Auditor. So the external auditor is a contractor, and we have to do an RFP, or procurement, every 3 years and do our contracting for that service through the Office of the State Auditor. They have an approved list that they review every year. And that audit, it looks at the financial statements and our compliance with a variety of different requirements, including federal grant requirements, the uniform guidance, as well as any requirements that are applicable to specific federal grants that we might have, state grant requirements, state law compliance, rules and regulations. So that's our external audit. The city also has an ordinance that relates to internal audit, and we also have an audit committee that oversees that internal audit function. The McCard report back in 2017 recommended that the city consider outsourcing that internal audit function. Prior to that, there was a staff member that was performing internal audits, and one of the recommendations of the McCard report was that that be contracted out to provide more of separation, more independence between the internal audit function and the city staff. So the city took that recommendation and they did a procurement, and they hired REDW, which is an accounting firm, to perform internal audits. And over the years, REDW performed a variety of internal audits. There was one that was done on the police evidence room. There was another one done more recently related to payroll and human resources. Trying to think, they're posted on the finance department's homepage. So if you want to take a look at those reports. So what an internal audit does is it looks at a specific operational area, usually within an organization, and it reviews the operations and checks to see if we're compliant with our own policies and procedures. They might work with the function to recommend process changes. Usually they're not involved in implementing, but sometimes they might assist with things like policies and procedures and documenting the current practices and recommending changes. So internal audit is more process driven and more operational. External audit is looking at the financial statements. Are the financial statements presented in compliance with generally accepted accounting principles? And are is the city following the requirements for things like our federal grants and, state law requirements? That's what they're looking at in the external audit. So the focus is different. The work that's performed is different, and the type of reports that they prepare are different. The auditing standards are governed by different authorities. In governmental auditing for the external audit, there's something called Yellow Book, which is put out by the U.S. Governmental Accountability Office, and that prescribes the auditing standards for the external auditors. There's a different organization called the Association of Internal Auditors that puts out their own standards for internal audit. So it's 2 sides of the same coin, and they sometimes work together, but they're 2 different functions.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate you taking the time to go over that. So, Counselor Lee Garcia.
You, Madam Chair, and just, as I was going and studying over this, the packet, I was in the account inquiry pages, and so, in the bar, it says we're moving over $795,883. If you take, I'm just looking at this and I could be looking at it wrong or how, just kind of some clarification. Fiscal year 22, there was a $749,519 that looks to be unused or available. It doesn't meet the 795,883. And if you're looking at what was over for fiscal year 21, if you add those two together, it's more. So just kind of for math purposes, wondering where the 795,883 is coming from.
Madam Chair and Councillor Lee Garcia, so it's actually from the fiscal year 2023 column. It is the sum of the three available numbers from FY 2023, because we're carrying this forward from FY 2023, the last fiscal year, into the current fiscal year. So the 795,883 consists of 289,718.21 from object 5103 plus 52,761 from object 5103.10 plus 453,403.15 from object 5103.30. So that's how you get to
The total amount.
795,883.
Thank you. And just for clarification, again, it's the money that was already budgeted for, which was unused.
Correct, Madam Chair and Councillor Garcia, that's correct. This is funding that was allocated for auditing and accounting professional services. So the external auditor and the consultant in FY 23 that was not expended, and we're bringing that forward now into FY 2024.
Thank you. Just wanted that clarification. No further questions.
Thank you so much. Any other questions or comments from members of the committee? And if not, can I have a motion?
Move to approve.
And a motion and a second. May I please have a roll call? Ms.
Counselor
Martin?
Chavis,
Yes.
Counselor Lee Garcia,
Yes.
Counselor Michael Garcia,
Yes.
Counselor Villarreal,
Yes,
Counselor Cassett,
Yes.
motion passes.
Thank you so much.
I meant Chair Cassett, sorry.
Not a problem. Moving on to item F, it's consideration of a resolution sponsored by Mayor Alan Weber. It's a resolution establishing the City of Santa Fe's priorities for consideration by the New Mexico State Legislature during the 57th Legislature State of New Mexico First Session 2024. We have Marcy Iannarino here. I do not think we have Director Wheeler here, but we do have Director Oster in case there's any questions on finance. And this was pulled by both Councillor Michael Garcia and Councilman Villarreal. So whichever one of you would like to go first.
For the Councilwoman Villarreal.
All right, Councilman Villarreal.
so I'm not the only one that can't really hear you all. I think it's the system, so it's not my computer. I think there's other folks on here, including staff that can't hear very well. So hopefully we can figure that out for the future. If I don't hear your response, hopefully you can repeat, but I just wanted to say that, let me get to that document, that overall, I think the legislative priorities resolution is pretty thorough and comprehensive. There's some new stuff in there that I appreciated, and then it also hit some of the legislation that we've consistently supported. So I think there's some good high points there. I was wanting to know a couple things. So the top 5 legislative priorities. One is, capital outlay for homelessness housing. The other is for recreation and outdoor programs, specifically the MRC Sports Complex Soccer Valley, waste water and water, or the wastewater treatment plant. And then it talks about fire safety for the fire station number 2. And then the last one, number 5, talks about a funding request for 22.5 million for Arroyo de los Chamizos Richards Avenue project, which is something we've been working on for a while. That's important. And I was just curious, I thought Midtown was going to be on here as one of the top, because it's kind of seen as a little bit more regional in nature. And so I was curious about that. And if this particular one for Arroyo de los Chamizos, I thought we were going to go like get some other bond funding for that. So maybe staff can talk a little bit about that.
Madam Chair, can you guys hear me? Okay, so I actually don't know about this piece of it for number 5. My understanding is that Director Wheeler was involved in these. But these 5 are what my office received from her. So that's as far as I know.
I believe that didn't we pass a resolution naming these top 5? And I believe Midtown got bumped for the wastewater treatment plant because we decided that that was a higher priority given the challenges. Am I remembering that correctly?
For the ICIP resolution,
I remember passing a resolution where we already approved these top 5 before this. Am I misremembering?
Madam Chair, I think you're correct. Midtown is still on the ICIP list. It's not listed in this top 5. I think it might be 6 or 7. I was trying to find the ICIP list so I could respond to that.
Madam Chair, I can pull it up if you guys just give us a quick second.
Yeah, that'd be great. And it really goes back to, I believe we voted on it and that we had, that it was during the challenges of the wastewater treatment, which is why that change occurred.
Which is fine. I just want to make sure, I know it's for sure on the ICIP list. I just don't remember what number. And I know we have some requests from last ICIP, so I don't think we can tap into that yet. But I know that it's there. So I just want to make sure that I understood that right. And then the other question was probably for Director Wheeler for the road project. If there was, I guess I was under the impression that we were going to do bonding for that one. And I guess I'm curious if that is something that rises to the level of kind of a regional project that would get funding from the legislature. I mean, I hope it does. I guess I just was concerned that because it's real localized, that wouldn't be kind of that top 5. They wouldn't see that as something that has like a regional approach. And Director Wheeler had said that there was going to be a bond opportunity for that project. So I don't know if anyone knows any info on that.
As to, Madam Chair, Councilor Villarreal, as to the bonding, I am not sure.
Okay.
But I do have the ICIP list that we adopted with the resolution. And the order has on number 5, just as it shows up in this legislation that we're currently contemplating. Number 5 is listed as Arroyo de los Chamizos, Richards Avenue. So.
Okay, so that was something that we voted on that last resolution. Arroyo de los Chamizos is on that one.
That's correct.
Okay,
The
good to know.
resolution, it ended up being resolution number 2023-32.
Great.
And it is a resolution adopting the City of Santa Fe's 2025 through 2029 infrastructure capital improvements plan. So, and then it has the attached ICIP, like the actual list.
Okay, I think I just forgot because we were making some last minute adjustments on that resolution. So thanks for the clarity. The other question I had was, we make some statements about, certain legislation we support, and I'm wondering if it helps to back it up by a resolution that we passed. Specifically, the one I'm looking at is legislation that supports reproductive rights. And we didn't reference the resolution that we passed. And I don't know if Counselor Cassett could remind, I feel like it was this year, although maybe it was last year because time just goes so quickly, but
It was the
I
last
didn't know.
legislative session.
What's that?
It's already been a year since we passed the resolution around.
I'm wondering if we should reference it, because as often as possible, some of these points, we've actually had resolutions that support that notion or support that effort. So that one in particular didn't have a reference to that resolution. So I was just going to suggest to add that piece. And if there's any other sections of this resolution on the further resolved sections, if there's legislation that we've had supporting some of these initiatives or some of these priorities. So just a thought, just to double check that, because I know that one for sure we did have a resolution that would correspond with that. And then I think, let me just scroll through really quick. I think that's it. Those are the, let me double check here. Yeah. Oh, I know. Oh, wait. Let me see. Midtown. Got that. Okay. I think I'm good. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Councilor Michael Garcia.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Marcy, for being here. And I think my question was similar in the nature that Councilwoman Villarreal's was in regards to which of these items could be covered with a bond. And I think unfortunately you don't have the knowledge from Director Wheeler to respond to that. So I think that's the next stop. Where is this going? This is going to Public Works and Utilities on Monday. And I guess, can we make sure, well, she'll be there because she staffs that meeting. So I'll make sure to take that meeting, that question there.
Director Cho, did you have a response to that question?
Madam Chair, Councilor Garcia, I did take the liberty of texting Director Wheeler, see if she could weigh in just for now, but I'm sure she can get into more detail at Public Works. She did say that just because of the size of the project, which is, in her words, massive.
Sorry, Director Cho, can you speak more into the?
In her words, the size of the project is massive, and so, there will be bonding, but it wouldn't cover necessarily the entire need. So I think she can elaborate on that probably at Public Works, but that's the general response.
Okay. And I think the other questions were around amounts. So I think Director Wheeler is probably the best person to answer these questions, and I'm happy to defer them until our next committee meeting. So with that, I think kind of at a standstill with that. So I'll hand it back to you, Madam Chair.
Thank you so much. Any other, Councilor Michael or Lee Garcia?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And initially I didn't pull this, but just based upon some of the conversation that I just heard, in regards to the legislative requests, and I get that fully, what we're asking for from the legislature. What I'm not really keen on the whole package of everything, because there will be some things that obviously I may not support as far as the recommendation. And it's kind of troublesome when you obviously want part of it, but you don't like all of it. And so I think that some of these items that possibly are there as be it further resolved, aren't necessarily what total governing body would want to push forth. So what would be the steps in future to push forth some of these, because obviously we're asking the state legislature for funding. But then package in here, we're also asking the state legislature to be attentive to certain issues that may or may not be the purview of the city. Maybe they are. Not everybody may agree or with everything. And so just the question as to why it's packaged all in one. Thank you.
Madam Chair and Counselor Lee Garcia. I don't know why it's packaged the way that it is, except that this is the way that the mayor brought it forward. But I'd imagine that if you wanted to try to propose an amendment, you could do that.
Thank you. I just, here again, I read through it, but wasn't prepared to go through it fully today at committee. And so, those are my concerns, and I think that, that may be, steps here in the future because, there are some things in here that I don't really obviously fully support. So if I'm going to vote for some of it, got to vote for all of it. There's a problem there. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Counselor, I know that part of the reason that we package this is that if we were to do a resolution for every single one of these, we would tie up legislative services for a really long time. But as Marcy mentioned, because it is still a resolution, we're still able to follow the regular legislative process to bring forward amendments. Any other questions or comments on this item?
Madam Chair,
Councilwoman Villarreal?
I just want to make a comment based on what Councilor Garcia was talking about. In the past, we've always packaged it this way. And in the past, there's been things that were added to the list that I wasn't too keen on, but the majority of it I supported. And so in a way, it's not saying every single thing is going to have the same weight or focus, especially for a 30-day session. But in the past, I've had to just kind of let some of the pieces that I wasn't too on board with, I kind of focused on the ones that I thought were important. So I did vote in favor of it, even if there were a couple items or legislation that had passed that I didn't vote for, but it was on the legislative priority list. So I'm just letting you know that that's kind of how it's been in the past, that we may not agree on every single item of the resolution, but the overarching kind of goals, especially the funding sources, is kind of the main piece to the resolution. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Any other questions or comments? And if not, can I have a motion?
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion and a second. May I please have a roll call?
Yes, Madam Chair, I couldn't hear the second.
Second was Counselor Chavez? Counselor Chavez.
Thank you. I'm sorry. Counselor Chavez,
Yes.
Counselor Lee Garcia,
Yes.
Counselor Michael Garcia,
Yes.
Counselor Villarreal,
Yes.
Chair Cassett,
Yes.
motion passes.
Thank you so much. All right, moving on. We have a unique event tonight. We actually have a public hearing here at Quality of Life. And this is on the Office of Affordable Housing seeks comment from the Quality of Life Committee and members of the general public concerning the pathways to removing obstacles to housing, pro-housing application to the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. I do not see Director Ladd, but we do have Cody Minnick here.
Director Ladd is on Zoom, Madam Chair.
Wonderful. We have Director Ladd on Zoom and also Florence Frank, our Workforce Housing Advisor, and Cody Minnick, our Project Manager for the Office of Affordable Housing. So I will hand it over to you guys.
Hello? Okay. Thanks, Madam Chair. Does this not work anymore? The self-present? Oh, beautiful. Alrighty, thank you so much. We first wanted to thank you for letting us use this venue for our public hearing for our pathways to removing obstacles to housing. We're going to refer to that as pro-housing from now on because it's a bit of a mouthful. But yeah, thank you, Madam Chair, for letting us use this. We're in a bit of a crunch time. We have to have this submitted by October 30th. So doing it at the governing body next week would have given us too little time to prepare the final package. So yeah, I am honored to stand here with my colleague Florence Frank and our director Alexander Ladd, who's participating over Zoom. And we've been, working very hard on this last few weeks and are excited to show you our work. First, we're going to be providing a brief overview of the funding opportunity. Then we'll go into describing what we're requesting, the proposed activities, as well as the potential impact and long-term effects of this funding that can have on our community. And then finally go into the next steps in the application process and then open it up for questions and comments. The Pro Housing Grant seeks to identify and remove barriers to affordable housing production and preservation through a competitive grant administered by the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. These barriers include, but are not limited to, barriers caused by outdated zoning, land use policies or regulations, inefficient procedures, gaps in available resources for development, deteriorating or inadequate infrastructure, lack of neighborhood amenities, or challenges to preserving existing housing stock, such as increasing threats from natural hazards, redevelopment pressures, or expiration of affordability requirements. As the city is embarking on its land development code rewrite, our office decided that we could not bypass applying for this unique and novel funding opportunity, as it aligns very well with the goals of the rewrite, can also be used to realize some of the housing affordability strategies outlined in the Midtown Community Development Plan. If our proposal is awarded, these funds will greatly enhance and support our city's overarching housing goals on these efforts. HUD is making $85 million available nationwide for this grant opportunity and expects to make approximately 20 awards. So this is a very competitive grant. The minimum award amount is $1 million and the maximum award is up to $10 million. The grant has a 6-year period of performance with the estimated project start date on January 31st, 2024, or whenever they issue the actual awards. And the estimated project end date is on September 30th, 2029. Applications must be submitted by midnight on October 30th, 2023, hence why we requested this expedited public hearing. The HUD is going to rate all the proposals on 5 key factors. The first being need at 35 points. And need is demonstrating acute demand for affordable housing. And the sub-factors are the production of affordable housing is not keeping pace with demand, insufficient inventory of affordable housing, widespread housing cost burden, and substandard overcrowded housing, all of which we can absolutely demonstrate in Santa Fe. The next is soundness of approach, which is demonstrating or explaining what is our vision, what's the geographic scope of our proposal, who are the key stakeholders and how are we engaging them, what is our budget and timeline proposals. The next is capacity, which is what is our staffing plan and how do we plan to manage the size and scope of this federal grant. The next is leverage at 10 points, which is funding that we have committed from outside resources for these projects. And then finally, demonstrating long-term impact. How can we demonstrate that these funded activities enables the production of affordable housing units long after the grant's period of performance? With that, I'm going to pass it over to Florence.
Can you all hear me? Perfect. Thank you, Cody. So Cody, my colleague, did a great overview of what the grant looks like. In the next couple of slides, I'm going to show and just really walk over how we got here. How did we come up with the barriers? What was our process? Most importantly, what are the activities we actually want to fund? And then a little bit of the strategy behind that. So the first bit is really these focus groups. We really wanted to have some conversation. What are the key barriers? The 3 of us can brainstorm all day, but we want to make sure we had a really good proposal for the city. So these graphs here are just some data points we had from these focus groups. We wanted to kick it off with an interactive exercise of what are some of the key barriers and kind of give some parameters. So for the one on the left, these are showing the question of what are the key barriers to housing production related to the city. We prompted a bunch of different potential barriers and asked people to put them in rank order. So as you can see here, the ones in blue are the ones that were ranked number 1, 2 is in orange, and 3 is in gray. So for the one on the left, you can see most of the responses in terms of those top 3 barriers were leaning towards land use and leaning towards zoning, and a little bit less on things like fees and charges or other types of policies. On the other side, looking at other types of barriers that also relate to housing production, but on the external side, things like availability of land, other things that are not specifically in the city's purview, but definitely impact housing production within the city. This was a little bit more vague. As you can see, it wasn't super clear what the priorities would be, a little bit more towards local opposition. But it's within these focus groups, it wasn't just this data, it was just prompting the question of what are these barriers and talking to people who are directly involved. With that, just to give a quick overview of what these 3 major portions of our application will be used for. And again, all of these slides I'm talking through, this is all within our soundness of approach if you want to see a little bit more detail. So the first is, again, unsurprisingly, about the land use code. Where we are at right now in terms of the rewrite is working on that framework. The assessment report, you might recall, was released a couple weeks ago. What we're proposing to do in this bigger funding proposal and application is to fund the next 2 steps. These 2 steps are really critical for outlining the specific processes and then the implementation. That's phases 2 and 3. The next, and this is really the bulk of our funding proposal, is about the pre-development for a specific parcel within Midtown. So this is the parcelization, survey design, all the pre-infrastructure work, not the construction of housing, but to get the site shovel ready. And this will support the construction eventually of 45 homes. And then the last bit is an initiation of a neighborhood stabilization process. This is a couple different components here. There's a little bit more detail within the grant, but the idea essentially is to have some balance. We know there's going to be a lot of investments in Midtown, and we want to make sure the neighborhood and like the surrounding area, everyone's feeling good about the process forward. And these are a lot of these key details brought up in the Midtown report. So this last, before I kick it over to Director Ladd, is really just to show, so we have all these ideas. What is the logic behind them? So this is really a theoretical map, but the key parts to focus on here are those parts in the diamonds. And those are the real goals we're looking at. So one is having increased affordable housing supply. The other is decreasing displacement that we're seeing here in Santa Fe. So all those little circles, those are the different activities I was just speaking to. Funding the land use code, funding the pre-development work, and funding that neighborhood stabilization process. As you can see, this is a super iterative process. All of them kind of lap onto each other. So starting from the top, working our way around to the left, just to walk through it quickly. What we envision is that with the land use code, that should increase the amount of market rate housing supply, also just affordable housing supply, particularly through inclusionary zoning. That should be one way to boost production there. On the other half, as I mentioned, this is all pre-development work, getting that infrastructure ready at Midtown for the specific parcel. That's not the construction of housing, but getting it shovel ready. Shovel ready means that we can get it towards that part of getting affordable housing supply. On the left-hand side, what we are going to do is have a really detailed RFP structure for that affordable housing development. And within that, we're going to have some incentives to develop a community land trust. This was a huge priority that was brought up in the Midtown development. So that, along with the neighborhood stabilization process, we're hoping both of those elements will feed toward that final goal of decreasing displacement. So I believe Director Ladd's going to jump in for the last couple of slides, really walking through the next steps and what are some key action items that we're looking to get out of this proposal.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for letting me attend remotely. I just first wanted to call both Cody and Florence out for getting this grant off the ground. I never could have done it by myself. Cody found it and Florence sort of helped manage it. And the 3 of us were working all together on the same Google document frantically to get this narrative pulled together. So we really appreciate any comments about parts that aren't clear. As I talk through the last few slides, you'll see we're still a ways away from really knowing how the funds will be spent, and the governing body ultimately will have final approval over the expenditure of funds if we get the funding. All right, I can't tell from here if is the slide showing?
No, it is not.
Oh, there we go. Okay. One of the,
Wait, still not showing for us. Hold on.
oh, it's not. Okay.
Let's see what we can do. There we go.
Yay. The way HUD, I just want to also, I guess, call out HUD for being really innovative with this grant. I think I've spent a lot of time around HUD, and that's not always a word that you associate with HUD, but this grant application it's just really cool. And a big piece of the narrative is focused on, even though it's not, doesn't have a lot of score attached to it, but a big part of the narrative is focused on how do you know if your efforts have worked, what are the long-term impacts and outcomes, and how do you ensure that you're providing housing opportunities for people who are currently maybe living in what HUD calls low opportunity areas. How do you provide housing opportunities for them to live in high opportunity areas? So as you will have noticed if you made it to the end of the application, which is quite dense and it's a lot of words, but we do spend quite a bit of time talking about this. I think the potential impact, I think we feel like all of these items on this slide are achievable through the use of these grant funds. We're really excited. We think that this is a way to, we know all of these ideas are good ones. They came out of the community development plan. They came out of the Midtown development plan. They've come out of various other planning initiatives. These are all things we've been talking about for a long time, and really the gap between regulation and implementation, this funding is set up to kind of close that gap, and so that we can see how the regulatory environment can be amended to then be implemented to result in more housing, but also how that can go hand in hand with creating more opportunities for people who wouldn't otherwise have those opportunities or wouldn't have access to those opportunities. We think it's replicable. We think we can do this kind of work in other parts of the city and other projects. And we thought it made a lot of sense to focus on Midtown because we can actually make a difference, specifically looking at that first residential tract that was identified through our Midtown planning process as 100% affordable, really prioritizing the use of an innovative ownership model to bring down costs, but also to ensure that the long-term governance is through the people living there and not outside owners. So we're really excited. We think that all of them are achievable through this grant. Next slide, please. The other thing that the application asked for was deliverables and measurables, and how do you determine, again, whether the impact that you are shooting for is getting, or the outcome rather, is achieved as a result of the use of the funds. So we kind of looked at a few different things. We know that greenfield development, sort of bigger projects happen in the south and western parts of town. Part of that's just the land use reality. The land out there is flatter. There's more of it that's undeveloped. It has more modern infrastructure. So we were sort of thinking about, well, that means that a lot of folks don't have access to higher opportunity areas, which really translates into expensive areas of town. So how could that be achieved? Because we know we're not going to be doing any mass development in District 1. So we thought of different ways that incremental infill could be achieved. And one of those obviously is looking at how many building permits, understanding the barriers for people to build ADUs in their backyard, as well as other incremental infill. So we could look at what that rate of building permits is. We could measure that and see if we're having an effect. We also know, looking at census data, that the populations in District 1 and 2 tend to be older, whiter, and wealthier. And so we're sort of trying to think of like, how can we measure that there are more opportunities for folks with lower incomes to live in those districts. And so that's another measurable we can look at. Right now, about 600 homes are in some form of permitting or approval process. So we wanted to look at if they get to being under construction and permitted, like that's also an achievement. So sort of what are the barriers to getting that to happen? And that's actually, I'm sorry, 600 homes that are approved, but not in permitting or under construction phase. So, because there's a barrier sometimes to getting to those final phases. So how do we measure that? And then we also know that we've had an outflow of low income renters replaced by higher income renters. So how do we reduce that? And this is something we can also measure. How do we look at whether current renters are becoming homeowners? Because that means they're probably not leaving our community if they're able to buy homes. And I think just in general, we know we've been measuring cost burden for a while. We want to look at how do we lower cost burden rates and increase long-term affordability through various either helping people with refinancing, helping people with energy efficiency or accessibility retrofits so they can stay in their homes longer. So what are some of the ways to do that in already existing neighborhoods? And the last slide. So the next steps, we're currently in the middle of the public comment period. That is open until October 24th. Florence talked a little bit about the initial meetings with stakeholders and bringing together some of the public engagement from the Midtown plans. This public comment period right now is for the grant itself. We will note all of the comments that we get through email, through people attending meetings, through phone calls, however they come through. What's feasible to integrate, we'll put into the draft, but we will not change the draft noticeably at this stage. And it doesn't look like we'll need to. Let me just, I'll leave it at that. We'll continue updating the public on our progress. And then finally, no dollars will be spent or budgeted until the governing body approves those expenditures. So if we do get the funding, we'll find out in January. It would probably take us into the next fiscal year before we were able to get the funds obligated to a certain activity, but the governing body again will have full final approval and review of those uses of the funds. And with that is the last slide, and we're happy to stand for any questions.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Really appreciate you all coming here and the work that you've done on this. As I mentioned, this is a public hearing. I am not seeing anybody in the room. Is there anybody on Zoom who wishes to speak? If you would like to speak, please raise your hand, your virtual hand, and we will call on you. Any takers? Doesn't look like it. Okay, we will close the public hearing. Oh wait, actually, just kidding, on to us. Any questions, comments from the governing body? Councilor Michael Garcia.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for the presentation. Really appreciate it. And I really appreciate you going after these available resources. But hope we get them. And so it was under 5 million we're going for. We should be shooting for 10 million given our needs, but I definitely understand given the pool overall resources, I think it was 80 million. So appreciate going after some resources in general. I do have some questions just because there seems to be some inconsistencies regarding the identification of the Hopewell Man neighborhood. And so early on in the report, I can't remember which page, I can scroll to it to find it, but it identifies it as Rios, St. Michael's, St. Francis, Cordova. That's kind of the boundaries. And then I'm looking here on page 30, and it's definitely not, that's not the boundaries as outlined on the map. And so just want to bring that to folks' attention because that's not consistent, and let's make sure that.
If I may, Madam Chair, Councilor Garcia, I believe the map you're referring to is the HUD affirmatively furthering fair housing map. And we actually, you can't select the entire neighborhood. That's just a census tract block group within, and it's that block group just north of the Midtown tract. Oh, never mind.
This one's identifying some of the affordable housing units in the area, that particularly right around Midtown, Las Palomas, Sangre de Cristo, Evergreen, Tres Santos. And so this one, it definitely goes down to St. Michael's area, but then it cuts up like what is, yeesh, I don't even know what road that is. It's not Pacheco, maybe Lorca. It's very weirdly, so according to the earlier statement, it would go all the way up to St. Francis. And then up St. Francis, and it kind of, the way that in the map is it cuts through some of the neighborhood. So just to make sure, if you want to maybe edit that. But I guess that gets to a question I've been trying to determine how we're identifying Hopewell Man neighborhood, because I live in that neighborhood. And I remember never was identified as Hopewell Man growing up. And then when I moved back to Santa Fe about 10, 12 years ago, it was that district you're identifying as Hopewell Man was identified as the Triangle District. And now we're calling that whole area Hopewell Man, which is now incorporating much different areas. You've got the South Pacheco neighborhood area, you've got the Casa Linda neighborhood, you've got my neighborhood, which has never been identified with Hopewell Man. And I think, hey, I'll be identified with it if it helps us bring resources. But I think the challenge I'm seeing is it's a very large geographic area. And from what I've heard from my constituents is the immediate concerns and needs is within that Hopewell and Man neighborhood area. For folks that aren't familiar, Hopewell and Man are two parallel streets. And so it's not a neighborhood, so to speak. And so if we're going to have such a large geographic area, which has very much different income levels. I mean, you've got the Casa Linda neighborhood, which has different community needs than the Hopewell Man neighborhood. You've got the South Pacheco neighborhood, which has got different needs. I mean, we're working on putting sidewalks in South Pacheco, whereas some of these other neighborhoods have, well, actually, no, the sidewalk ends in front of my house, ironically enough. It literally does. And the only reason why I have a sidewalk in front of my house is because the city installed ADA accessible ramps. And so it was required. And the city only did half of them in front of my house, but the other half, still dirt. So I think as we're moving, and this is more so broad picture, as we're working towards looking at bringing in available resources, and because it is such now expanded large geographic area of what we're going to identify as Hopewell Man, I think we need to ensure we're engaging the appropriate stakeholders. I'm sure you've been working with Chainbreaker, who is very well established in our neighborhood, but I don't know how much they've engaged Casa Linda, South Pacheco, and I want to make sure that those folks' needs are represented as well in this project. It is ultimately a process where, like I said, I'm fine with identifying it as that, but we've got to make sure that there's different needs. And the Hopewell Man need is high renter. It's lots of lower income individuals living in that neighborhood. Lots of first generation Americans living in that neighborhood. And you jump 5 blocks north you're jumping into a completely different neighborhood where you've got folks that have been living there since the housing was developed 60, 70 years ago. I mean, I'm a prime example of that. I live in my grandparents' house that they built 60 years ago. So I guess my feedback and comment is that as we're moving forward with this process, that we're ensuring that we're proactively engaging the entire area. And I know $1 million definitely doesn't go far in a process like this. Because if we're, from my recollection with some of the Midtown development plan is we were going to provide some resources for home improvements for folks that couldn't do that. The infrastructure needs, the connectivity challenges we're seeing. And I think this is a fantastic first step in that process. But I think as we take those many multiple steps after, which we're going to have to take, because, you know, the development in Midtown is not going to be it's done in a year. It's going to be over a decade plus. And so we've got to make sure that as we're taking this long endeavor of development, that we're doing it in the conscientious effort to, if we're going to identify a much larger swath of what has been historically identified as Hopewell Man, then we make sure we don't forget those folks. Because again, I'd love for the rest of my sidewalk to be paved in front of my house, but now that's my responsibility as a homeowner because that's the responsibility I took on having that property. But it comes to that connectivity. I mean, literally, you can't walk during the remainder down the street of my block because it ends, you have to switch sides of the street. And those are not uncommon challenges, not even only to our district, but I mean, we're looking at these issues. Let's make sure we're doing it in a holistic manner. The other question I got around is,
Director Brown, did you have I think you have an answer for
Yeah.
some of the about borders.
Partly, if I could, Madam Chair, Councilor Garcia, I want to take responsibility for the nomenclature. When I came on board of the city in 2018, I was in charge of naming the opportunity zones for the governor to approve. And so we named that census tract block, which Mr. Minich had described. We named it as Hopewell Man, and we submitted it to the U.S. Treasury. So that's why it's kind of named Hopewell Man, because it was the full census tract that you had mentioned, the boundary. So we will be, and I think Director Ladd can speak to this too, we will be looking at the entire neighborhood, that whole census tract. It's just that we named it through the U.S. Treasury, so it's in the record somewhere. But I just want to let you know that's how that came about as a name, is that we had to give it a name so that when we submitted it for the Opportunity Zone designation, that's the reason why it was there. I think the map you might be looking for is from our public Wi-Fi area that we're trying to serve through some of our other federal funding that has a broader border, but the census tract that is what we're going to use. Using it for the blight report for the destabilization and work that we're going to do infrastructure-wise in that neighborhood. So,
okay, fantastic. And I'm glad to hear about the Wi-Fi connectivity because it is as well. But I think just to kind of close the point I was trying to make is that when we do this engagement, folks that have historically lived in those neighborhoods, I mean, even you get into Casa Linda and they're going to say you're part of Hopewell Man. They're going to say, wait, no, I'm not. I'm in Casa Linda. We need to do some education for folks because we need to make sure, yes, you're included in this new parcel of land that has been identified as Hopewell Man. And we want to make sure that they're engaged and they come and participate in the process because I'd hate for folks to us have a public engagement session and say, we're talking about Hopewell Man. And Casa Linda neighbors say, that's not us. And we miss out on a great opportunity in hearing from them. So I think if we are proactive in promoting this new area as identified as Hopewell Man, it'll be definitely helpful for folks, especially like I said, the long-term folks that have lived there their entire lives. Some live lived in those homes their entire lives. In regards to the amount of funding, how did we arrive at these numbers? I mean, what was our justifications in applying? I mean, I can understand, the 2.5 million in regards to how maybe a construction costs, et cetera. But like, why the 1 million for Hopewell Man? Why not more? Why not less?
Madam Chair, Counselor Garcia, I can answer that. The budget for this work is based loosely on what we know this work typically costs in a general sense, if that makes sense. And you were right, the infrastructure costs are very precise. The costs of the land use code rewrite is very precise. But the consulting work, we can't really get super specific proposals at this stage until we're actually doing the procurement, because we don't want any of our likely partners to influence the procurement and then conflict themselves out. So we just had to be a little bit more careful in a general sense, but we were also looking at some of the work that we were doing during the Midtown planning process and kind of understanding the scope of what we thought needed to be done for this next phase.
Thank you, Director Ladd. I really appreciate that. I guess that to get more into the micro of the stability planning for Hopewell Man, is it just consultant work, or are we going to begin to utilize some of those resources for infrastructure development, home ownership, home repairs? I mean, what is the ultimate goal with that $1 million ask?
Counselor Garcia, that's a great question. And that's one of the really exciting things about the way they've written this grant, is that all of those costs are eligible under the grant. And so the way we worded that section, you'll see we're somewhat general about the specific activities we would fund, because we feel like as we look at what the displacement factors are, and they're not going to be present in that entire area, most likely. So we would then want to narrow down where we think the funds can be used most effectively, and possibly, and one of the things we know for certain is that our community lacks capacity for some of the innovative homeownership models. And we've heard loud and clear from the community that a land trust model or some sort of cooperative ownership model is very desirable for Midtown. But that requires a certain capacity for governance. So we have to create that capacity. So we know some of the funds will be used in that way. We think a lot of the benefits of the anti-displacement work will be identifying what are the factors for housing instability, and it's going to be different for every household, right? So for some people, it will be something like they just need a better rate on their mortgage. So refinancing is going to help stabilize their housing situation, or they need help with some emergency home repairs, or they need to just have some rental assistance for a while. So we're really kind of keeping it pretty open, because we want to be able to, we don't want to sort of tie our hands at this stage. First of all, we don't know if we're going to get the money, but if we, once we do get it, we want to be as flexible and nimble as possible.
Gotcha. Thank you, Director Ladd. I appreciate that. And just kind of going over the 3 goals in the application for the public that might not be aware. One of them is mitigate the impacts from private and public market investment at Midtown. Another goal is address decades of underinvestment in neighborhood amenities, infrastructure, and services. And then the last goal is improve safety, pedestrian connectivity, and access to open space. And I guess from a different perspective, I mean, very broad in the sense, very different opportunities to utilize these resources should we receive them. But I'm thinking of it from the perspective as the grantor and somebody reading the application saying, well, these are very broad. is there, do folks preparing the application feel that it needs to be more specific? I mean, I guess my question is, should we say we are going to fix 10 miles of sidewalks? We are going to provide, 25 families with rental assistance. And I think that's definitely getting into the micro, but that's a lot of what these grants come down to when it comes to being scored. And so I guess just to put that out there, I don't expect you to know the answer, but I want us to be successful with the application. I've got decades of experience reviewing and writing and reading grants, scoring grants, and those are things that can separate you from the cream of the crop, or those that, well, they've got a good idea, but they don't have an implementation plan associated with it. And so I guess that would be maybe feedback I have, is how this city is ultimately going to take these resources and demonstrate the impact with them. Because it's great to have the ask, but when the funder comes back and says, okay, you said you're going to do X, Y, and Z, what are the performance measures in place? What are the benchmarks? How can you show me that you were ultimately successful with the investment of these resources that we granted? So just putting that out there for helpful feedback, because again, I want to make sure we're successful with this process, and because creating some stabilization opportunities for this neighborhood is an absolute priority of mine. It's been one of the biggest concerns prior to being a counselor when I knew we were going to take over Midtown, is that what I knew was the old school version of Hopewell Man was going to be gentrified, and we were going to lose some of our longest standing historical families in Santa Fe. And I want to do everything we can to prevent that. So thank you for going after these funds to begin this much, much needed process. So no other comments. I just really appreciate, these are daunting tasks. And so thank you for going after them. Thank you, Director Ladd. I appreciate it. And good luck. Good luck. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Counselor. Other questions, comments from members of the committee? I can't see Councilman Villarreal.
Madam Chair.
Yes. Councilman
Hi.
Villarreal. That's what I was concerned about. I couldn't see you. Go ahead.
I just wanted to thank the staff for putting together a pretty thorough and clear proposal. We talked about it at length at the CDC, and some of the members brought up some of the similar comments that Councilor Garcia brought up. And so I think we'll just have to evaluate where in the application needs to be more detailed and where we can be more general, because they ask a lot of different questions. There's a lot of information they're requesting, and there's also limitations on the amount of text you can put. So that's the balance here, I think, is just making sure that staff can provide the details with enough that HUD feels like it's sufficient, and then where we need to elaborate. So I think that staff can evaluate that, but I'd also want to thank the CDC members. There was a lot of great questions asked during our meeting today. And so I think there may be some things staff needs to think about, but overall, I think people were pretty content with what we're proposing and the potential for different areas to be funded. So I just wanted to thank staff again for their work.
So much, Councilwoman. Any other questions, comments? I just have one question that I think kind of goes along these lines of the balance between. It sounds like this is a different approach to granting that HUD is taking, that is kind of providing more of that flexibility. So I, along with Councilor Garcia, those of us working in the grant world, we're so used to the rigidity and how that often doesn't work. So it's really exciting. But one thing that is meant that Director Ladd mentioned is that, no contracts, no money would be spent without the approval of the governing body if we were to receive these funds. But my guess is that that does not mean that we could take all of the money that we receive and shunt it into just one of these projects. We still would have to be hitting all these different pieces that we have discussed, correct?
Yes, Madam Chair, that's correct. I would say the way they describe it is if there need to be some slight adjustments, there's a cyclical process, we'd have to apply for that. It wouldn't be that we'd be removed from the system. The way they kind of describe it is once you get the funding, they'll work with us from there. But that's part of why this matters so much. It's just
Yeah, wonderful. Well, that's really exciting. And I echo my gratitude for you all really looking at this and going after this funding and finding these different funding sources. I know that we have all talked about this quite a bit, is how we try to bring in other funding sources for the various priorities that we have at the city. So thank you. Congratulations on just this part. And I'm hoping that we will be able to congratulate y'all on actually receiving that grant for us. So really, thank you so much. Any other questions or comments? And I do believe if not, we do vote.
Mm.
Nope. No vote?
Madam Chair, we don't need a vote.
Oh,
It's
great.
just purely for discussion and feedback.
Wonderful. Okay. Well, then no voting. Thank you all so much.
But thank you. We really appreciate the time.
I know I actually really was excited to vote on this one. I'm like, yes, let's vote on this. Not so long. Oh, well, we're in support. So, all right, moving along. Thank you all for being here. Matters from staff.
And Chair, members of the council, thank you very much. I have a couple of things I want to add. I want to first thank my team at the Affordable Housing Group, Florence and Cody and Director Ladd, who's live from the West Coast. They did a great job. We're very excited about this grant and what this could mean. So I just want to say thank you guys. It was a great job. A couple of different items from the different community development departments. From tourism, I want to just share that there's a total of 6 non-festival groups coming to Santa Fe in November. And 3 of those groups are using the convention center with a total of 1,600 combined attendees, which is a very large number for us sailing the convention center. So we're very excited about the convention sales that are happening. And also want to thank the tourism group for the sponsorship they did with the powwow. It was very successful. So we're excited about that being a recurring event that's happening at the plaza. On the planning and land use side, a cross-department team is working on a land use guides for outdoor dining. Right now, we're working on a quick guide for downtown dining. And then the larger guide we're working on is for all the different types of outdoor dining that could happen in the city. Mall parking lots in restaurants, in backyards of restaurants, et cetera. So that's being worked through, and then we will be sending an ordinance through the governing body to put that into law once the guides are done. On the Arts and Culture Department side, our new Deputy Director, Charlotte Russell, is here, working with our Director Johnson. And we have the International Film Fest coming up this weekend, starts tomorrow through this weekend coming up. And then they're also working with the airport team on art in public places that we will use for the grand opening of the airport that's scheduled for December. So they're working with the airport team who actually wanted to put sports TVs up around the place, but they're working through helping them with art and ideas around how to make it more Santa Fe once it's all done. So that's a big thing that's going on there. On the economic development side, this is Manufacturing Month, and there's a big event that the department is hosting with Fab Lab on October 27th at the Higher Education Center. And then they are continuing their small business and growth business webinars. There's one coming on the 6th of November about LIDA and JTIP, how that works with companies. And then if you haven't signed up for the monthly newsletter, which is chock full of information, it's OED newsletter at santafe.gov. And then lastly, Midtown, the pre-development infrastructure work is going on. There's a lot of planning going on, lots of meetings. We've brought on a new partner. It's called WSP on the public works infrastructure side. So they're working with us on critical path timelines, construction management timelines, and working through all the documents that we have to get through as we make our way to the engineering, the parcelization, the stormwater, et cetera. And we're also working on a progress report presentation that we'll bring to EDAC on the 1st of November, and then we'll bring it to the governing body on the 8th. So that's part of my full stack. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Ochoa.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Some of this stuff I've mentioned before, but I thought I'd give you all a few updates. Our youth summit is happening tomorrow and the next day at the rail yard. So that's very exciting. It's very youth driven and youth focused, and we don't have a lot of non-youth participants, but we do look forward to sharing the results of that with you all. We have been invited to come by during lunch hour for adults. If you're in the rail yard area and that's easy for you, you're very welcome, but we're sort of trying to let it be their event as much as possible. And thank you again to Councilor Chavez for her support with that and getting the youth and her driving that really into the staff. Teen Center, again, is amazing. We've got 247 teens now registered. That represents 199 households, so some siblings in that. And they've served 597 teens to date, which is really amazing because it seems like just yesterday we were all celebrating the opening. So they're cooking with gas over at the Teen Center. And then I wanted to let you know that I just received an annual report that actually Cody Minich was good enough to share with me on Consuelo's Place, the Midtown shelter. Last year, they served 288 people, and they're at a 30% plus rate of housing those folks, which is pretty high. Just last quarter, the last quarter of last fiscal year, they served 91 adults and 31 children. They do serve quite a high proportion of families with children. It's really nice for families, obviously, to be able to stay in their own room and be safe behind their own door. And then of those folks in the last quarter, 29 got long-term housing. So as much as we can support them as they, struggle with sort of the insecurity of not, being a new program, I'd like us to do that because I think they're doing a great job there. I wanted to give a shout out tonight to our seniors respite and homemaker care program. We have a wonderful new program manager, Vicki Hernandez, in that program. And as many of you know, that program was shuttered. They shuttered their doors for 3 years during the pandemic. They couldn't go into people's homes. What that program does is provide support for family members caring for their older relatives. And if you might indulge me for a minute, we've had some really amazing comments from people who are the 126 seniors who are being served in their families right now in that program. Our family member has Parkinson's, and it's an answered prayer that the city of Santa Fe has helped us. The caregiving program service enables us to have better quality time and me to have time to take a break. May the powers that govern continue to bless us. And of the respite and homemaker folks that come in, you ladies are angels. Lastly, Homemaker Services is the best of all senior programs offered. My home was a wreck. There was no place to sit. I had papers all over. Little things have improved. And now I have a place to sit for guests. I'm 83 years old with no family support. And I have suffered from depression and PTSD. Because of this, I was unable to maintain my home just due to the support I've been given. My mental health has improved. My homemaker, Sophia, is one of my main supports. She is a whirlwind of energy and knows exactly what needs to be done. I'm so thankful for the program and the in-home support services. So this is something that's going on every single day in our city, and it doesn't get a lot of attention. It's just incredible. We're grateful to the state support we get for that program, and the city support as well, and the staff. Wanted to mention too, I think I mentioned last time that the police department is doing 3 special operations right now. The Blitz on speeding and noise, gun violence prevention among youth, and then encampment cleanup, encampment clearing. Not literally clearing the stuff, but asking people to leave and enforcing them leaving in close coordination with the park rangers. And again, everybody who is told they need to leave and vacate city property is given information about resources that they can use. One of the problems that we're finding, and we're beginning a small sort of working group on this, is that a lot of private property owners need to have an easy way to declare that they don't want people trespassing. Putting up signs is good, but then people take them down. So we really need to, we're working on streamlining the internal process. And also the kind of problem of what to do when the landlord is out of state and doesn't necessarily have the kind of engagement that a private business owner or a local business owner or an individual will have in that process. But police department, land use, constituent services, and legal are now working closely, and park rangers are now working closely together to troubleshoot and perhaps bring some ideas around legislation that might help us enforce some of these codes also around nuisance properties. That's exciting that we might get some good ideas coming out of that, which we may bring to you at some point. We'll have a couple of pushbacks of new ambulances, so look for your invitations. The fire department's very excited to bring those in and replace some older engines. And finally, I just wanted to mention that we'll be starting next week a story project for community health and safety. We have so many, all the departments in the city have, so many incredible employees doing this just amazing work of public service every day that don't get the recognition. They don't necessarily have a voice that we want them to have in how things go. And so the story project is a professional writer will spend time next week with 30 of our sort of standout employees who really just go over and above and get some of their input on what they do or in their jobs every day and what they see and what their contribution is. And that's laying a foundation too for a strategic planning process for the department where we really do it as much as we can from the ground up. So look forward to sharing with you some of the results of that project. Thank you.
Thank you so much. All right, moving on to matters from the committee. Any matters from members of the committee? Nope. Matters from the chair. Oh, I'm sorry, Counselor Chavez, go right ahead.
I just wanted, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to include that for the youth symposium, numbers were limited for middle schoolers and high school students Thursday and Friday, but the Teen Center is hosting an extension of the youth symposium on Saturday from 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. So any youth members that weren't able to participate through their school can go visit the Teen Center on Saturday.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Matters from the chair, I have none. Our next meeting is Wednesday, November 1st, and at 6:39 we are adjourned. Thank you.